Chapter 1. I've always enjoyed traveling. The hustle and bustle of airports, the excitement of new destinations. It's invigorating. But my experience at Holloway International changed everything. It started as a routine business trip. My flight was scheduled to depart from Gate 37 in Terminal D. Holloway International was massive, a sprawling labyrinth of corridors, shops, and gates. I'd flown out of there numerous times without incident, but that night was different. I arrived late, around 11 p.m. The terminal was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the usual chaos. As I walked through security, I noticed something odd. The TSA agents seemed unusually somber. Their eyes were hollow, their movements mechanical. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my fatigue. Once through security, I headed toward Gate 37. The terminal was a maze of dimly lit corridors. The signs seemed to change direction, leading me in circles. My sense of unease grew with each step. After what felt like an eternity, I found Gate 37. The area was deserted, save for a few other passengers who looked as bewildered as I felt. The gate agent, an older woman with a vacant stare, informed us that the flight was delayed due to unforeseen circumstances. I settled into a chair, trying to shake off the strange atmosphere. My fellow passengers were an eclectic mix. A nervous businessman, a young woman engrossed in her phone, an elderly couple whispering to each other. We exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Hours passed and the tension grew. The lights flickered intermittently, casting long, unsettling shadows. A chill crept through the terminal, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. I checked my watch, 2 a.m. The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing that the flight was now boarding. We gathered our belongings and formed a line, but something felt off. The plane, visible through the windows, was shrouded in darkness. No lights, no crew, just an ominous silhouette. As we boarded, the sense of dread intensified. The plane's interior was pitch black, save for a few emergency lights casting a sickly green glow. The seats were tattered, and the air smelled musty, like an old, abandoned building. We took our seats in silence, the unease palpable. The plane's engines roared to life, and we taxied down the runway. The takeoff was rough, the plane shuddering violently as if resisting the ascent. Once airborne, the lights flickered and went out completely. Panic set in. The young woman screamed, the elderly couple clutched each other, and the businessman frantically pressed the call button. Suddenly, the plane leveled out, and the lights came back on, revealing an even more horrifying sight. The seats were now occupied by ghostly figures, their eyes vacant, their mouths twisted in silent screams. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder and turned to see the gate agent, her face pale and lifeless. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally. I tried to stand, but my body wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed, forced to watch as the plane descended into darkness. The ghostly passengers closed in, their hands reaching out, their eyes empty voids. The last thing I remember was the gate agent's chilling smile as she whispered, "Welcome to Holloway." I woke up in a cold sweat, back in the terminal. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow through the windows. Passengers bustled around, oblivious to my terror. I stumbled to the nearest airport staff member, babbling about the flight from Gate 37. She gave me a puzzled look. "Gate 37? That gate's been closed for years. There was an accident. A plane went down, no survivors. It's been shut ever since." My blood ran cold as I stared at the now abandoned gate. The memory of that night haunted me, a twisted reminder that some destinations are best left uncharted. And every time I pass through an airport, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, dreading the day I might hear that chilling whisper again, "Welcome to Holloway." The days following my experience at Holloway International were a blur. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by nightmares of ghostly figures and eerie whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even in the safety of my own home. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and every creak or groan of the house sent my heart racing. Desperate for answers, I delved into the history of Holloway International. I discovered that the airport had a dark past. Decades ago, a flight from Gate 37 had crashed shortly after takeoff. All passengers and crew were lost. Rumors of ghost sightings and strange occurrences began to circulate soon after, and eventually, the gate was permanently closed. The airport tried to bury the incident, but whispers of the haunted gate persisted among staff and frequent flyers. Couldn't let it go. I needed closure. I reached out to the few people I remembered seeing at the gate that night. The businessman, the young woman, the elderly couple, none of them appeared in any of my searches. It was as if they had vanished without a trace. My obsession with finding them consumed me. One evening, as I was sifting through old news articles, I received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "They know you saw them." The body of the email contained a single sentence: "Meet me at Holloway International, Terminal D, midnight." Against my better judgment, I went. The airport was just as I remembered it, its vast corridors eerily quiet. I made my way to Terminal D, my footsteps echoing ominously. At exactly midnight, I arrived at Gate 37. The gate was abandoned, cordoned off with yellow tape. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed a figure standing near the gate. It was the gate agent from that night, her vacant eyes now filled with a sinister awareness. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, her voice echoing in the empty terminal. "I need to know what happened," I demanded, my voice trembling. She sighed, a sound filled with centuries of sorrow. "You weren't supposed to leave. Now they want you back." Before I could react, the terminal around me began to warp and twist. The lights flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I felt myself being pulled backward, the world around me dissolving into a cacophony of whispers and ghostly wails. When the darkness lifted, I found myself back on the plane. The same passengers surrounded me, their eyes filled with the same vacant despair. The gate agent stood at the front, her expression a mix of pity and resignation. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You belong to Holloway now." The plane began its descent into darkness once more. This time, I knew there would be no waking up. The passengers reached out to me, their ghostly hands cold and unforgiving. The last thing I heard before everything went black was the gate agent's voice, echoing in my mind. "You shouldn't have come back." To this day, no one knows what really happened to me. My name became another mystery, another unsolved disappearance tied to the infamous Gate 37. And somewhere in the labyrinthine halls of Holloway International, the ghosts of the past still wander, forever bound to the cursed terminal. Chapter 2. I had always been fascinated by aviation. As a young pilot, I often took assignments that would take me to various parts of the world. That's how I found myself at Greywood International Airport, a now-abandoned terminal that once bustled with life. The airport had closed down a decade ago after a series of unexplained incidents, but I had a penchant for exploring forgotten places. This was my latest adventure. The sun had just set, casting an eerie glow over the desolate airfield. My footsteps echoed through the empty halls, where the only light came from the sporadic flickers of malfunctioning fluorescent bulbs. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the distant, hollow whispers of a once vibrant place. I wandered through the terminal, snapping pictures and recording videos. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the occasional creak of the aging structure. As I approached the check-in counters, I noticed a row of old, dusty monitors. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed a few keys. To my surprise, one of the monitors flickered to life, displaying a series of flight schedules from years ago. Just then, a chill ran down my spine. I felt like I was being watched. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing, just the empty terminal stretching out behind me. I shook off the feeling and continued my exploration. As I walked past the security checkpoint, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, on the conveyor belt of the baggage scanner, was a suitcase. It looked new, untouched by the years of abandonment. I approached it cautiously and hesitated before opening it. Inside, I found old clothes, a passport, and a diary. The passport belonged to a woman named Sophia Turner. The diary's last entry was dated the day the airport shut down. It read, "I'm trapped here. The flight was supposed to take off hours ago, but something is wrong. People are disappearing. I can hear voices calling my name. I'm scared." My heart pounded in my chest as I read the words. I flipped through the diary, my hands trembling. The entries became increasingly frantic, detailing strange occurrences and sightings of shadowy figures. Suddenly, I heard footsteps echoing through the terminal. They weren't mine. I quickly hid behind a pillar and peered out. A woman in an old-fashioned stewardess uniform was walking slowly, her head down. Her movements were stiff and unnatural, and her face was obscured by shadows. "Sophia," I whispered, though I knew it couldn't be her. The figure stopped, and I held my breath. She turned her head slowly, and for a moment, I saw her eyes. Empty, soulless voids that seemed to suck the light from the room. I bolted. I ran through the terminal, my footsteps echoing louder than ever. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I could feel the presence of unseen eyes watching me, closing in. I burst through the doors and into the open air, gasping for breath. The airport loomed behind me, its shadow stretching out like a grasping hand. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. As days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the memories of Graywood International Airport. The faces and crowds began to blur with Sophia Turner's hollow gaze, and I often found myself waking up in cold sweats, haunted by the diary's final, desperate entries. The pull to return grew stronger with each passing night, despite the fear that clawed at my insides. Eventually, I gave in, convinced that I needed answers. I arrived back at the airport just as twilight gave way to darkness. The air was still, almost as if it were holding its breath. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, I stepped through the cracked glass doors and into the forsaken terminal. The silence was heavier this time, oppressive. I navigated the darkened corridors, guided by the dim beam of my flashlight. As I approached the check-in counters again, I noticed something peculiar. The once dusty and deserted counters were now meticulously clean, and the monitors displayed current flight information. This was impossible. My heart raced as I realized the airport seemed to be alive. I ventured further, towards the baggage claim area. As I walked, I could hear faint music, an old tune that seemed to drift from the speakers. It was hauntingly familiar, like something out of a long-forgotten past. The eerie melody accompanied me as I moved closer to the source of the music, the main concourse. The concourse, which had been empty on my last visit, was now bustling with spectral passengers. Their forms were translucent, moving in a slow, dreamlike state. My breath caught as I watched them, mesmerized and terrified. Among them, I spotted the stewardess I had seen before, her movements still stiff and robotic. Gathering my courage, I approached her. "Sophia," I called out softly. Her head snapped towards me, and for a moment, her empty eyes seemed to lock onto mine. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, a chilling wind swept through the concourse, carrying with it the sound of distant screams. I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering. The concourse began to shift, the walls warping and the shadows stretching towards me. I turned to run, but the exit seemed to recede into the distance. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped. Desperate, I remembered the diary. Maybe it held more clues. I retraced my steps to the security checkpoint, hoping to find the suitcase where I had left it. To my relief, it was still there. I grabbed the diary and flipped through the pages, searching for anything I might have missed. One entry stood out, one I hadn't noticed before. It was scrawled in hurried, almost illegible handwriting. "The key is in the tower. Only then can the cycle be broken." The control tower. It was a long shot, but it was my only hope. I raced through the terminal, dodging the ghostly figures that seemed to reach out for me. The climb to the control tower was exhausting, my legs burning with each step. As I reached the top, I found the door slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, the room was filled with outdated equipment and papers strewn across the floor. At the center of the room stood an old radio, its dials glowing faintly. I approached it cautiously and noticed a key attached to a chain, hanging from the radio. With trembling hands, I took the key and turned the radio's dial. Static filled the room, followed by a voice, Sophia's voice. "Help us. Break the cycle." The shadows in the room began to converge, forming a dark, twisting vortex. The key in my hand grew warm, almost burning. Instinctively, I plunged it into the radio's keyhole. There was a blinding flash of light, and the vortex imploded, sucking in the shadows and the ghostly figures along with it. When the light faded, I found myself alone in the control tower. The airport was silent once more, but this time, it felt different. The oppressive weight was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. I descended the stairs and walked through the Terminal 1 last time. The spectral passengers had vanished, leaving only the hollow shell of the airport behind. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I knew that whatever haunted Greywood International Airport had been laid to rest. The whispers had ceased, and the shadows were no more. But the memories would stay with me forever, a reminder of the Terminal of Shadows and the secrets it had kept hidden for so long.